Hi, you're on a rock floating through space. That's pretty cool, right? In the beginning, there was nothing, but then 40,000 years ago, people in modern-day Eurasia start to migrate to Japan, which becomes an island 20,000 years later. What's so important about Japan? Well, Japanese people are the only people who can become sorcerers, with like 2 exceptions. A sorcerer is a person who can utilize cursed energy and can wield it as a weapon, often in the form of a cursed technique. Cursed energy is energy produced by negative emotions, and as such, almost everybody has it, but only those sorcerer guys can utilize it effectively. Cursed energy can also manifest into curses, but don't be misinformed. Curses are not curse users. Curse users are simply evil sorcerers. So when a certain guy later is called the King of Curses, that is not him being the strongest curse, but rather the strongest curse user, or the strongest evil sorcerer. Alright, do we have that clear? Okay, sometime between the years 101 through 180, this lame old guy, Druv Lokdawala, conquers all of Japan. Is this guy important? No, but he reincarnates twice. By the way, the history of JJK that predates the actual main story is kind of loose and unconnected, so a lot of these events will be taking place hundreds of years apart and will have almost nothing to do with each other. Like how 600 years later, Tengen, an immortal being, spreads Japanese Buddhism and establishes the foundation of Jujutsu sorcery. Time Vessel Association is also founded, which is a cult dedicated to forcing Tengen to evolve, since his immortality involves switching bodies every 500 years or so in order to avoid evolving. Oh hey, now we're in the Heian era, also known as the Golden Age of Sorcery. Also, it's the era of naked people for whatever reason. These 2 guys, Michizane Sugawara and Masakado Taira, ancestors of the Gojo clan and Zenin clan respectively, are born and die, wreaking havoc on Japan upon their deaths, becoming 2 of the 3 vengeful spirits, which in JJK just means that they were strong sorcerers and are probably responsible for the strong bloodlines of the 3 main clans. This living body slash brain hopping guy, Kenjaku, is doing a little bit of scheming to merge all of Japan with the immortal being Tengen in order to force the evolution of all humans. He then promptly gets defeated by the 6 Eyes user of the time. What are the 6 Eyes? They're these super cool physical attributes that, when paired with the Limitless technique, basically make you an unkillable god. Anyways, cause Kenjaku's a fraud, Tengen merges with the Star Plasma Vessel, which prevents Kenjaku's plans because Tengen only evolves if he doesn't merge. What's the Star Plasma Vessel? Who cares? It's not really important. It just kind of means that you can merge with Tengen and you're sort of strong. This dude Genshin, dies, and in turn becomes a special grade cursed object, the Prison Realm. At some point during the Heian era, the King of Curses, Ryomen Sukuna, is born, and will grow to be considered the strongest sorcerer of the Heian era and possibly of all time. Oh, also, he was supposed to be a twin, but he ate his brother while he was in the womb because he was bored, so he looks like a freak of nature with 4 arms and 4 eyes, and he's like 7 feet tall. Elsewhere, the captain of the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad is given the name Takako Uro, and is executed as a proxy for a member of the Fujiwara clan, who are basically just a bloodline that is implied to be important, but serves almost no relevance to the story. Sukuna's little stalker-ass girlfriend, Yorozu, defeats the Fujiwara clan's subjugation unit and in turn becomes accepted by them, living a life of luxury. Meanwhile, Sukuna goes to a little festival after murdering fucking everybody who was important at the time, including, but not limited to, the Fujiwara's elite Celestial Squad and the 5 Void Generals, as well as the Sugawara clan and an entity known as Angel's Team, plus the Abe clan, allowing Sukuna to earn a deity status. Yorozu falls in love with Sukuna at first sight, to which he responds with only the kindness of affection. Emperor Sotoku Tenno, ancestor of the Kamo clan, dies and becomes the 3rd vengeful spirit. Sadetsana Ashia creates the simple domain, or the domain for the weak, which really just lets you protect yourself from the actual cool domains. However, this technique ends up being largely gatekept by the big 3 clans as well as the New Shadow School during the following centuries in order to prevent curses from learning it. At some point during the Heian era, Sukuna passes away, but not before agreeing to live on as a cursed object with the help of Kenjaku, being turned into the first Sukuna finger. After viewing the process to get turned into a cursed object, Sukuna promptly repeats it for himself a further 20 times. At some point after he dies, Tengen gets a hold of Sukuna's corpse and plays dress up with it. Then nothing happens for about 400 years. Kenjaku, being the hater-ass bitch that he is, kills the 6 Eyes holder and the Star Plasma Vessel less than a month after they were born in order to bring about his evil schemes. But somehow, a new 6 Eyes user and Star Plasma Vessel emerge the day of Tengen's merger, to which Kenjaku says, "Hey, fuck this shit," and seeks out the Prison Realm. The Gojo clan's 6 Eyes and Limitless user and the Zenin clan's 10 Shadows user fights to the death in front of their clans, with both being killed by the pinnacle of the 10 Shadows technique, the nearly untamable 8-handled sword Divergent Sila Divine General Maharaga, who may or may not be important later. Meanwhile, Kenjaku is busy forging binding vows with other sorcerers, promising to reincarnate them in a couple of centuries so long as they participate in the Culling Games. More on this later. Among these sorcerers is Hajime Kashimo, the strongest sorcerer of the Edo period, a period populated almost entirely by rice farmers. Oh, and I guess there's this guy Ishigori too, but he's not important. Kashimo agrees to be reincarnated so that he can get a chance to fight Sukuna, seeing as Sukuna will also be participating in the Culling Games. 200 years later, Kenjaku kills the leader of the Kamo clan and takes his place, performing experiments that would ruin the late Noritoshi Kamo's reputation. During these experiments, he had a cursed spirit impregnate a woman 9 times, literally those pregnancies, and mix his blood with them, creating objects known as the Death Womb paintings. These paintings are then confiscated by Jujutsu Tech and sealed for 150 years. Then, a catalyst happened. December 7th, 1989, Satoru Gojo, another 6 Eyes and Limitless user, is born. Gojo's mere existence completely shifted the balance of the Jujutsu world, resulting in stronger cursed spirits being born. A couple of months later, Suguru Geto is born, and the two of them would later become best friends. Riko Amanai is born, and 4 years later, her parents die in a car accident. Kongshu, a handler for curse users, meets Toji Zenin. Toji later attempts to see a young Satoru Gojo, only to be spotted by him, which rocks him to his core. He promptly leaves the Zenin clan and gets married, taking the name Fushiguro for himself. On September 23rd, 2000, the most important figure in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, Aoi Todo, is born. Certified psychopath Rika Orimoto is born, along with her future husband Yuta Akatsu less than a year later. Kenjaku, in all of his wisdom, steals the body of Kaori Itadori, takes some backshots, and gets pregnant. For some reason, Jin Itadori, Kaori's husband, doesn't suspect a goddamn thing, even though it is implied that the actual Kaori has been dead for a bit prior to Kenjaku's body-stealing shenanigans. Kenjaku later gives birth to Yuji Itadori, sealing the first of Sukuna's fingers inside of him. Oh, and Jin goes missing sometime later. Megami Fushiguro is born, and his mother dies postpartum. Toji, being the stand-up dad that he is, offers to sell Megami to the Zenin clan and remarries a couple of years later before abandoning that family in order to resume a life of being an assassin. Also, that girl Rika's parents both randomly die a couple years apart, and it is implied that she had some part in their deaths. Two sorcerers, Utsuhime and Mei, are trapped in a cursed mansion for 2 days, only to be saved by the now sophomores Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto. Gojo and Geto are then given the task of protecting the current star plasma vessel, Riko Amanai, and escorting her to Tengen so that they can merge and renew their body. During the mission, Toji places a bounty on Amanai on behalf of Kongshu and the Time Vessel Association and has her guardian kidnapped. Gojo and Geto rescue her guardian, spend a nice day at the beach and aquarium, and return to Jujutsu Tech. Gojo turns off his infinity for a whole 6 seconds, courtesy of being awake for 3 days straight, only to be jumped by Toji, revealing his true powers as a heavenly restriction user. Having a heavenly restriction basically means that you are either insanely fit and stronger than 99% of curse techniques, or you have glass bones and can use your curse energy slightly farther. Anyways, Geto flees with Riko and her maid, Gojo fucking dies, and Toji gets the most disrespectful kill in all of JJK by delivering some iron while it's hot and fresh straight into Riko's head. Oh, and her maid is dead. Geto fights Toji, only to get folded like an omelet, to which Toji calls himself a monkey who can't use Jujutsu, which Geto decides to steal and make his whole personality. Toji spares Geto, not wanting to inconvenience himself, and delivers Riko's corpse to the Time Vessel Association. Afterwards, he goes for a walk, only to discover that Satoru Gojo is not dead and is actually stronger than he has ever been before. Gojo had learned how to use reverse curse technique to heal himself while in death's grasp, utilizing the mostly unknown hollow technique Purple to finish off Toji. In his last moments, Toji asks Gojo to take care of his son before he gets sold to the Zenin clan, dying standing up like the baller that he is. Meanwhile, Geto is up wiggling Toji's worm. Upon reclaiming Riko's corpse, Gojo asks Geto if they should kill everybody in the room with them, who, mind you, were responsible for Riko's death. Geto says no, which is an action that I'm sure he will not regret later. Gojo is now officially the strongest, leaving Geto, who he was once considered equal with, in the dust. Geto meets local special grade and professional bum Yuki Tsukumo. Geto ponders how to get rid of all curses, even proposing the idea of killing all non-sorcerers, to which Yuki says, yeah. And that's what he decides to do, or I guess tries to anyways. But first, Nanami's underling, Haibara, dies, pushing Geto over the edge, which makes him decide to slaughter a village, adopting 2 twins in the process, and getting a death warrant on his head for, you know, committing heinous crimes. Gojo goes to kill him, only for Geto to break up with him in front of a KFC. Geto takes over a Time Vessel Association facility to use as the breeding grounds for his new cult. Gojo adopts Megami, and Yuki takes the god Aoi Todo under her wing. In 2010, Gojo and Shoko graduate from Jujutsu Tech. Remember those kids Yuta and Rika? Yeah, well, Rika fucking dies, and Yuta accidentally curses her to become this hideous curse spirit, the Queen of Curses. Meanwhile, after centuries of planning, Kenjaku finally acquires the prison realm. The strongest sorcerer in history, Miwa, gets recruited, and Nanami returns to sorcery after previously quitting. Tsumiki, Megami's stepsister, gets marked by Kenjaku while jumping off of a bridge, falling into a coma shortly afterwards. This lawyer, Hiromi Higuruma, is working on a murder case in which he knows his defendant is innocent. Rika, now haunting Yuta, kills some of his bullies, to which the Jujutsu higher-ups decide to have Yuta executed. Gojo, being the goat that he is though, intervenes. Yuta enters Jujutsu Tech and meets Maki Zenin, Toge Inumaki, and Panda. Kenjaku's kid, Yuji Itadori, enters Maji Vegas, a pachinko parlor. Inumaki and Yuta investigate a shopping center, only to get jumped by one of Geto's curse spirits, to which Gojo's freaky ass recognizes him by smelling him. Yuta then solos literally everybody at the 2017 Sister Goodwill event in Kyoto, and Geto declares war on Jujutsu Tech. On Christmas Eve, Geto releases a parade of thousands of curses as a distraction, and has this guy Miguel attempt to fight Gojo. He then goes to the school and beats the shit out of Maki, Inumaki, and Panda. Yuta fights Geto, uses curse speech somehow, and makes out with Rika for some reason, before gravely entering Geto. Geto wanders off, only to get finished off by Gojo, who fails to get rid of his body properly, so Kenjaku steals it for himself, seeing a prime opportunity to do a little trolling later. Rika is now freed from Yuta's curse, and Yuta loses his special grade status, being a nobody with no technique now. Gojo, trying to act like he didn't murder his best friend, proclaims that Yuta is a distant relative of Michizane Sugawara, and by proxy, the Gojo clan. 3 months later, Yuta regains his special grade status as a result of summoning Rika again. Kenjaku and Uraume, Sukuna's chef from 1,000 years ago, ago, meet with foreign governments about using sorcerers as an energy source, convincing multiple governments to send over troops to Japan in November in an attempt to harvest curse energy. And Yuji Itadori remembers he's the protagonist and graduates middle school. His grandpa becomes terminally ill and dies, willing to give him the lore drop of the century, but he ignores it. However, his grandpa's death has a profound effect on his worldview. During a freak incident that could have been avoided if Megumi wasn't an awful sorcerer at the time, Yuji swallows one of Sukuna's fingers, inadvertently allowing Sukuna to reincarnate for the first time. Gojo then shows up and flexes on Sukuna. The higher-ups at Jujutsu High see this and decide to once again try to kill a kid, but Gojo postpones Yuji's execution, instead giving him a second finger and tasking him with acting as a radar to find the rest of Sukuna's fingers, although Gege kind of forgets about this thankfully. Yuji meets Nobara, and they are dispatched to a juvenile detention center, to which they are jumped by a special grade curse spirit. Losing the battle, Itadori lets Sukuna out, who then kills the special grade curse spirit, absolutely pranks Megumi, taking a strange interest in him, before killing Itadori. Except Itadori is not dead either, rather Sukuna is holding him hostage in his brain until he makes a binding vow with him. What is a binding vow? A binding vow is this super cool thing where a sorcerer can sacrifice something in exchange for some benefit, and they are basically the backbone of Jujutsu sorcery. You can also break a binding vow and simply return to the state you were before you made it, but only if it's a personal binding vow and only if the benefit wasn't permanent. If you make a binding vow with another person and break it, something so dastardly happens that even Sukuna wouldn't dare to do it. Although this is basically just Gege's way of not having to write it later. Anyways, Itadori and Sukuna settle on a binding vow where Sukuna can take over his body for a minute without hurting anyone in exchange for restoring Itadori's heart. This will have zero consequences later. Gojo continues training Itadori in secret while everybody thinks he's dead and encounters Jogo, a special grade curse spirit who is aligned with Kenjaku. Seeing a prime opportunity for a little education, Gojo teleports Itadori to him to learn about domain expansions. Jogo and Gojo have a Mog-off, to which Gojo stands proud as the honored one. However, Jogo lives on because of his ally, Hanami, who third parties them and runs off with his head. Megumi and Nobara simultaneously meet the best and worst characters in the series, Todo and Mai respectively. Todo almost forces Megumi to summon Mahoraga, Mai proves that she is a fraud, and ultimately they become mostly chill with each other. Gojo confronts Jujutsu Tech's principal, Gakuganji, about how he essentially forced Gojo's students into a death mission, to which he basically tells them to fuck off. So Gojo decides to pay Yuta and Miguel a visit in Africa while they're looking for more pieces of the cursed object, the Black Rope. Gojo then calls Miguel a racial slur and informs Yuta of the importance of protecting Yuji and the other first and second years when the time comes. Here is also where we learn that Miguel's technique is essentially that one kid on Instagram who breakdances and cries, so that's pretty cool. Meanwhile, Mahito, a member of Kenjaku's little gang, decides to experiment with his powers because he is literally a baby, deciding to do so on a group of loud teenagers in a movie theater because they basically brought it upon themselves. A young boy, Junpei, sees this and decides to befriend Mahito, to which Mahito rewards him with the curse technique. Yuji and Nanami fight a bunch of transfigured humans. Nanami surprisingly holds his own against an admittedly inexperienced Mahito, and Yuji later befriends Junpei and his mother. However, Mahito coerces Junpei into killing a bully of his after framing him for the death of his mother. Junpei attempts to kill his bully, only to be interrupted by Itadori. The two scuffle and Mahito transfigures Junpei, hoping to force Yuji into making a binding vow with Sukuna. Sukuna, however, could not care less, as he already has a binding vow with Yuji, and would much rather just laugh at Yuji's expense instead of making another, marking the true start of Sukuna's hater-ass behavior. Mahito jumps Yuji, only for Sukuna to tell him to fuck off. Nanami and Yuji jump Mahito, prompting him to learn how to use domain expansion on the spot, which doesn't really work in the end because Yuji breaks into his domain, forcing Mahito to make contact with Sukuna again, causing him to be gravely injured in the effort. Mahito then slithers away into the sewer. 2018 Sister School Goodwill event takes place, and Yuji finally rejoins his classmates, unsurprisingly traumatizing them with the sight of their dead friend. Gakuganji plots with the Kyoto students to kill Itadori, which gets interrupted by the best friendship in all of JJK between My Goat, Todo, and Yuji. Panda beats the ever-loving shit out of Glassman over here, Maki mollywops her fraudulent sister and Miwa, and Hanami infiltrates the school. A barrier is produced, preventing only Satoru Gojo from entering it. Todo and Yuji beat the ever-loving shit out of Hanami, and Gojo breaks the barrier before giving Hanami the Toji treatment, with Mahito stealing 3 of the Death Wound paintings, and 6 Sukuna fingers elsewhere. Also, they play baseball. Mahito incarnates the Death Wound paintings into Kechitsu, Eso, and Choso, who's the only one that everybody actually cares about. Yuji and Nobara murder Kechitsu and Eso, and Megumi gets a rematch against a finger bearer, who is much similar to the one that they lost to in the juvenile detention center. On the verge of throwing his life away, Megumi remembers a talk between him and Gojo, and uses his domain for the first time, though it's incomplete, beating the finger bearer in the process, with Itadori consuming yet another finger. Urahime informs the first years of a traitor amongst them, who turns out to be Mekamaru. They go to confront him, only to learn that he has already escaped. The real Mekamaru, meanwhile, is bargaining with our villains, who offer to cure his glass bones in exchange for betraying his closest comrades. After curing him, they try to jump him, to which an Evangelion/Gurren Lagann-esque mecha battle occurs, which is absolutely amazing, by the way. Kenjaku schemes out loud to himself about Mahito, but doesn't act upon this idea just yet, and despite fighting valiantly with the intent of warning his allies of the impending danger upon them all, Mekamaru loses his battle, prompting the Kenjaku and his group of hooligans cast a veil around Shibuya, calling out Satoru Gojo specifically. Now keep up with me here, as everything I'm about to list happens within the span of about 4 hours. Gojo fights Jogo, Hanami, and Choso, and kills Hanami with the power of $500 cologne. Yuji fights this locust thing, and a train full of transfigured humans arrive at Gojo's platform, with the villains thinking that Gojo would never domain expand on a bunch of civilians, to which Gojo says fuck you and expands his domain anyways, but only for 0.2 seconds out of consideration for the civilians nearby, which cripples them for 2 months instead of permanently. Ijichi, Gojo's best friend, almost dies, and Gojo gets so stressed out at the sight of his ex that he forgets to not get sealed, which means no more Gojo for the next 131 chapters. Mekamaru, who is still kind of alive, informs Yuji of Gojo's sealing, to which he becomes a crow. Mahito splits himself in two, this guy Haruto beats the shit out of Nobara and Nita, only to get absolutely decked by Nanami, in a moment that may or may not be responsible for JJK fans having a bad reputation. Yuji and Megami beat this guy with an ugly ass haircut, Mei meets Kenjaku and fights the smallpox deity with the help of the Groomed One, this grandma accidentally brings Toji back to life, Choso fights Yuji, almost kills him, and has a crisis because Yuji is actually his brother somehow. Meanwhile, Nanami, Naobito, and Maki fight the Curse of the Sea, Dagon, only to get third-partied by the now reawakened Toji. After killing Dagon, Toji escorts his son out of the room for some father-son bonding, and Jogo seemingly kills those 3 I mentioned earlier. Except spoilers, none of them die right here because why would they? Geto's adopted daughters and Jogo feed Yuji a total of 11 more fingers, to which Sukuna kills Geto's daughters and gives Jogo a little too much off the top. Toji fights Megami and ends his own existence, content with how his son ended up. Jogo fights Sukuna, and despite putting up an absolutely legendary fight, gets cooked. Megami finally unleashes Mahoraga on this absolute nobody after edging it for 100 chapters, and Sukuna kills Mahoraga to keep Megami alive, taking a profound interest in the boy. Oh, and Shibuya is gone, kinda. Sukuna gives Yuji his body back for now, and Yuji tries to help in any way he can. Nanami promptly flies to Malaysia in front of Yuji, and Yuji and Mahito fight. Nobara fights Mahito's duplicate and promptly dies in a way that is just vague enough to where Gege can change his mind later. After receiving one of his worst beatings so far, Yuji loses his spirit, to which my glorious King Todo tells him to knock that shit off. They then proceed to beat the ever-loving shit out of Mahito. Mahito, however, decides to evolve as a result of hitting a couple black flashes, which really just means that he gets a power-up for 2 seconds before Yuji remembers he's the main character and hits him with a black flash of his own. Fun fact, by the way, Gege said that if Yuji didn't hit the black flash here, everybody would have died in an instant. Anyways, Todo sacrifices one of his arms in order to avoid being Nanami'd, which means no more Todo in the plot. Just before Yuji can finish off Mahito, Kenjaku shows up in third party's Mahito, revealing that he had been waiting for him to become stronger before stealing idol transfiguration for himself with Geto's technique, killing Mahito in the process. Yuki shows up and everybody fights Kenjaku, except not really because Uraume's only role in the plot is to stall every time one of the important villains is in danger, but whatever. Kenjaku uses idol transfiguration remotely, awakening all of the people he had promised to reincarnate centuries ago into bodies that he had previously marked with cursed objects, including Megami's sister, kicking off the event known as the Culling Games. Kenjaku then promptly fucks off, teasing Itadori with the prison realm before he leaves. 10 colonies are isolated by barriers in Japan, but that's not important just yet. Remember Higuruma? Well, his client is found guilty, so Higuruma kills the judge and the prosecutor with the aid of his newly awakened curse technique. Yuta arrives in Japan, saves a little girl, and meets with the higher-ups, who announce a couple of things. Gojo is a criminal, and freeing him is illegal. Geto is back on a death warrant. Yaga, their principal, is also to be executed. And Itadori is a criminal with his execution no longer being postponed. Yuta Akatsu volunteers to be Yuji's executioner because Sukuna's domain in Shibuya cut off one of Inumaki's arms. The higher-ups still don't trust him though, so they force him to make a binding vow ensuring he will kill Itadori. The leader of the Zenin clan, Naobito, dies as a result of Jogo's onslaught, making Megami the de facto leader due to having the 10 Shadows technique, so this guy Naoya gets jealous and plots to kill him. Meanwhile, Kenjaku becomes the leader of the Kama clan once again. Upon meeting him, Yuta completely outclasses Itadori in battle even without the use of his curse technique, and promptly kills him, but only for a millisecond, as he starts his heart back up with RCT at the moment of death, fulfilling his binding vow. Meanwhile, Choso beats Naoya in combat through the power of being an older brother. Yuta saves Naoya's life on the condition that he informs the higher-ups of Itadori's death, and later reveals to Itadori that no, he isn't evil, and is actually here to protect Yuji, seeing as they both come from similar circumstances. Megami wakes up from his nap and remembers that he is allowed to be useful, before promptly asking for help with saving his sister, and heavily implying that Nobara is dead. The 4 of them reconvene with Yuki and Maki, and then they go to meet the now evolved Tengen, who lore dumps on them about Kenjaku's evil plan, and informs them of the Culling Games player named Angel, who apparently can help them free Gojo. Tengen gives them the back of the prison realm, which, when paired with Angel's technique, can be used to free Gojo, but on the condition that Choso and Yuki stay to protect Tengen from Kenjaku. Also, Yaga dies. Yuta informs the gang of the expelled third-year student Hikari Kinji, who Yuta claims may be stronger than himself. Yuta then enters a culling game colony, and Yuji and Megumi infiltrate Hikari's fight club, only for Yuji to completely sell by pretending not to know who Gojo is. Hikari still ends up agreeing to help them because Megumi is the Zenin clan leader, wanting to use Megumi's status to help better the Jujutsu world, which really just means that he wants to allow gambling matches to be legal. They then learn of a now reincarnated Hajime Kashimo, that one strong guy from the rice farmer era, who now has blue hair and pronouns, as he decides to add a rule to the culling games that allows people to search for other players because he is searching for Sukuna. They decide to seek out Kashimo's help and the help of Higuruma, who also has over 100 points, since they figure that they can convince them to give up their points to add rules that suppress the culling games. They want to change the rules mainly so that Megumi's sister will be freed from the culling games. I should also probably explain what the culling games are, so I'm gonna do it in Fortnite terms. Kenjaku is essentially forcing 10 battle royales to happen at the same time, with a bunch of rules in place, designed to force the players to kill each other, more or less acting like the storm. Each sorcerer who is killed is worth 5 points, as opposed to normal people who are only worth 1. Getting 100 points allows you to add a rule, so long as it doesn't prevent the operation of the culling games or interfere with another rule. Meanwhile, Maki and Mai get captured by the Zenin clan, and Mai dies, which allows Maki to complete her heavenly restriction because apparently the universe considers twins to be the same person. Maki takes this in stride by slaughtering her former clan. However, Naoya, on the cusp of death, gets finished off by Maki's mother before she dies, which results in Naoya coming back as a curse. Panda and Hikari go into the Tokyo No. 2 colony to look for Kashimo, and Yuji and Megumi go into Tokyo No. 1 to look for Higuruma, starting everybody else's participation in the culling games, as Itadori was only considered a player previously due to Sukuna's binding vow with Kenjaku when he got turned into a finger. Megumi meets this guy Takaba, who essentially has the power of the cutaway gag, before having this really cool battle with this guy Reggie after being misled to believe that he was meeting Higuruma, even using a gym to mimic the effect of a complete domain expansion. After winning his fight against Reggie and his gang, Megumi is discovered by Angel upon collapsing from exhaustion. Yuji finds Higuruma, who, despite only having a technique for 2 weeks at this point, has already mastered domain expansion and is working his way backwards through his technique. He initially doesn't want to help Yuji, but after a battle and learning that Yuji is a good soul, Higuruma adds a rule allowing players to transfer points, giving Itadori 1 point so that he isn't subject to Rule 8. Higuruma then fucks off to go turn himself in for killing the people in the case he was involved in. And we turn our attention to Yuta Akatsu, who is currently dominating the Sendai colony, being labeled as second only to Gojo in terms of being an absolute baller. Yuta decimates that Druv guy from way earlier and makes out with and kills Kurorushi, a special grade cockroach curse. After witnessing this happen, these other incarnated sorcerers, Ishiguro and Uro, decide to fight Yuta. Uro reveals that Yuta is a Fujiwara in addition to a Sugawara, showing that he has a stronger bloodline than even Gojo. Yuta manifests Rika, and we learn that she is more or less like a storage device for Yuta, storing both cursed weapons and cursed techniques. Yuta's technique is that he can copy techniques, which is pretty fucking cool if you ask me. He has to have Rika eat a part of someone to copy it first though. Back to the battle, they pop a goddamn 3-way domain expansion, which means that none of them actually fully realize their domains. Anyways, Yuta styles on all of them, claiming Ishiguro's points before we turn our attention back to Panda and Hikari. Hikari fights this dweeb Charles, who bitches and moans about how hard being a mangaka is. Panda encounters Kashimo, who blows Panda's goddamn head off and almost kills him. Panda loses 2 of his cores before Hikari intervenes, commencing my second favorite battle in the series. Despite Kashimo's immense strength, he is unable to kill Hikari, whose domain allows him to become immortal and have infinite curse energy for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. After a bit of back and forth, a little bit of dancing, and incredible shows of battle prowess from the both of them, Hikari barely emerges as the victor. However, he determines that he would have lost to Kashimo had he used his technique, which he only didn't because it is a one-time use and he's saving it for Sukuna. Anyways, Kashimo joins the party and we get to see what Maki has been up to. Maki and Noritoshi Kamo, no not that one, this one, fight the reincarnated curse of Naoya Zenin. They initially get their shit rocked, with Maki even having to leave briefly to go heal. While Noritoshi is buying time, 2 people, Hagane Daido and Rokojushi Mio, stumble across the fight, both being incarnations of sorcerers who had previously lived for the katana and sumo wrestling respectively. Maki ponders how to ascend the heights of her heavenly restriction in order to match the skills of Toji, and discovers the secret behind it after 1,000 sumo matches within Mio's domain. Maki is now able to use her heavenly restriction to its full capabilities and can now keep up with Naoya Zenin's sheer speed. Even after Naoya uses his domain expansion, she is freely able to move in and out of it, remaining undetected by Naoya and his domain due to her lack of curse energy. Maki ends Naoya and is now on par with Toji in terms of strength. Itadori meets up with Megumi, Takaba, and Angel. They realize that they have enough points to save Megumi's sister through the addition of rules, and Angel informs them that she will help them free Gojo, but only on one condition. They must help her kill an incarnated sorcerer known as the Fallen, after being previously bodied by him during the Heian era. Sukuna surprisingly does Itadori a favor and points out that he is the Fallen. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the colony, those soldiers that Kenjaku had negotiated for arrive in Japan. It's revealed here that Kenjaku had all of these soldiers sent into the colonies with the express purpose of dying painful, miserable deaths, which would in turn create enough cursed energy to complete the preparations for his evil plan to merge Tengen with humanity. Back at the Tomb of the Star, Tengen and Yuki are talking about the ethics of forcing people to merge with him when Kenjaku finally strikes. techniques. Choso puts up a surprisingly good fight against his father, forcing him to reveal his third technique, anti-gravity system, which he had retained from his time as Itadori's mom. Yuki then tags in for Choso and reveals her technique to be mass. She can infinitely increase her mass with no loss of speed, allowing her to hit much harder than most. She forces Kenjaku to expand his domain, which is then dismantled by Tengen. Choso then rejoins the fight, and the two absolutely start dogging on Kenjaku, only for him to hit Yuki with a mini Uzumaki, forcing her to cast Choso out of the fight, urging him to live as a human. After a quick distraction from Tengen, Yuki increases her mass to the point of creating a black hole, which absolutely should have killed Kenjaku, but Kenjaku uses the reversal of his technique, since it was actually anti-gravity, making the reversal of gravity, which through an elaborate scheme that I don't understand, allows him to survive a fucking black hole. Kenjaku then absorbs Tengen, and we get back to our main gang. After dealing with the soldiers that had previously entered Japan, Megami adds a rule that allows a player to withdraw from the culling games so long as they have a substitute from outside of the colony and spend 100 points. Sumiki is finally transferred to Megami's colony with the purpose of withdrawing from the culling games, only for it to be revealed that Sumiki is gone, replaced by the incarnation of Yorozu after being awakened by Kenjaku's idol transfiguration, who is merely masquerading as Sumiki following her incarnation. Yorozu adds a rule to allow free entry and exit from the colonies and proclaims that she wants her first battle in 1,000 years to be against Sukuna before fleeing. While chasing her down, Sukuna seizes the moment, incanting the phrase "enchain," thus enacting the binding vow that he had made with Itadori near the start of the series. During his minute of control over Yuji's body, he forces Angel to be unconscious so that she can't extinguish him from Itadori's body, turns Itadori's finger into a cursed object, and chops it off as Yuji subconsciously didn't include himself in the "don't hurt anybody" part of his binding vow. Megami attempts to summon Mahoraga to buy time, but Sukuna stops him, forcefully feeding him the finger. The world comes to a stop as we see that Sukuna has now transferred himself into the body of Megami, acquiring the technique and body that he has been eyeing from the very beginning. Sukuna wastes no time absolutely bodying everybody, baiting Angel with some actual porn level acting, or getting into a scuffle with Maki and Yuji. However, Uraume comes along using their powers to stall the fight once again, informing Sukuna of the bath that they have prepared and that they need to leave at once. They do so on the back of an improved form of Nue, making fun of Itadori on their way out. The bath is revealed to be a ritual intended to sink Megami's soul into despair, aiding in breaking his will and giving Sukuna more control over his body. In order to ensure his control over Megami's body, he takes up Yorozu's offer for a fight. Yorozu wants to die at the hands of Sukuna's technique, but he refuses to use it, restricting himself to the 10 shadows so that when he does kill her, Megami will feel responsible for his sister's death. Sukuna, by the way, uses Megami's technique to more success than he ever did, and we actually get to see 9/10 of the 10 shadows, with the only exception being the tiger, but we never actually get to see that. Despite fighting her best, and even using the pinnacle of the construction technique, Yorozu is unable to defeat Sukuna, who is using the 10 shadows to nearly its fullest potential. In her final moments, Yorozu finds a strange sense of affection in Sukuna's attentiveness to her technique, gifting him with the curse tool he had used during the Heian era. Yorozu then succumbs to her wounds, and Megami gives up full control over his body. Kenjaku yaps a ton and adds 2 rules into the culling games. 1, no more players are allowed into the culling games, and 2, the culling games will end when everybody except for the bodies of Geto, Megami, and Uraume are dead. Despite these rules contradicting the infinite nature of the culling games, they are able to pass because Kenjaku learned the way of a toxic partner and threatened to end it all, in this case the culling games. Kenjaku then claims the original corpse of Sukuna from Tengen's crib for later use, and we cut back to the main cast. Angel says that she would be useless in a fight against Sukuna, but gives Yuta her technique off screen. Yuji and Choso have a brotherly bonding moment, and Yuji receives Yuki's documentation about souls. Shoko then mauls a little bit about Gojo, and with that we get Angel uses her technique on the back of the prison realm, but Gojo is nowhere to be seen. An earthquake happens, and we learn that Gojo emerged from the normal prison realm, which Kenjaku had placed at the bottom of the ocean, surrounded by cursed spirits. Removing the seal on the prison realm was supposed to kill him, but of course my glorious king wouldn't let something as simple as death stop him. Gojo immediately pulls up to run fades with Kenjaku, who cowers behind Sukuna. Gojo takes note of Megami's body being stolen, and rocks Uraume's shit, but both Sukuna and Gojo have business to take care of before a potential fight. So the two agree to fight on Christmas Eve, the same day that Geto had died nearly a year prior. We then get the most iconic panel in the series, and with that we prepare for Yuji consumes the rest of the Death Wound paintings, and Gojo goes to slaughter all of the higher-ups. However, beforehand, Yuta discusses the possibility of stealing Kenjaku's technique and using it to control Gojo's body in the event that he loses to Sukuna, to which Gojo agrees. The best character in all of JJK, Aoi Todo, makes his grand return, but in secret, out of fear of accidentally revealing the plan to Sukuna, since Itadori and him could possibly be linked in their memories. Todo states that he will help Yuta in his plan to take out Kenjaku, so that he may have a chance to fine-tune his new and improved curse technique, and that he will be responsible for helping the gang escape Sukuna's domain in the event that he is able to unleash it on the group following the unlikely event that Gojo dies. Meanwhile, Yuta goes to Africa to enlist Miguel's help in the event that Gojo loses to Sukuna. Uraume delivers the rest of Sukuna's fingers to him, except for one, so Sukuna eats his old head in place of it. The gang makes use of the groomed one's technique, which was previously thought to just be plain and simple teleportation. However, it actually allows him to swap people's souls into other bodies too. Using this, they speedrun learning RCT and anti-domain techniques in order to ensure everybody's safety if worse comes to worse. Right before the fight, we get our last glimpse of everybody together, and Sukuna reveals to Uraume that Jin Itadori, Yuji's father, was Sukuna's reincarnated twin, and that Kenjaku had got with him in order to specifically ensure Yuji's strength as a vessel, meaning that Itadori was always doomed to bring about Sukuna's reincarnation. With the aid of Urahime and Gakuganji, Gojo releases an absolute nuke of a hollow purple on Sukuna and reveals that he stole Toji's fit. Thus, we begin one of the best fights in manga history. After exchanging blows, the two begin a domain clash, which Gojo loses immediately because domains are weak to attacks from the outside, and Sukuna's domain, being barrierless, crumples Gojo's domain like a paper straw in water. Normally, this would mean that Gojo should have been folded right there, but because he's Satoru Gojo, he learns how to recover his burnt out technique with the RCT on the spot. Gojo expands his domain once more, changing its conditions to allow it to guard against attacks from the outside better. However, Sukuna takes advantage of the fact that anyone Gojo touches in his domain are immune to it, turning off Malevolent Shrine's sure hit effect on the inside of Infinite Void, expanding his own domain even further to allow it to collapse Gojo's domain once more. The onlookers expect Gojo to stall for time and heal, but Gojo expands his domain once more, before promptly shrinking it to a minuscule size, using his time in the prison realm as a reference. This was done with the purpose of withstanding Sukuna's domain, but Sukuna shrunk his domain down manually, increasing the output of it, crushing Satoru's domain once more. However, this time, Gojo had accomplished what he had intended, damaging Sukuna to the point of forcing his domain to release. The two expand their domains a further 2 times, with Gojo's Infinite Void finally landing on Sukuna himself. Sukuna, however, summons Mahoraga. Bewildering absolutely everybody, it is revealed that Sukuna had actually been hit by all 5 Infinite Voids thanks to the conditions of his domain, and using Mahoraga's ability to adapt to everything, he forced Megami's soul to tank the Infinite Voids and carry the burden of adaptation for Mahoraga, allowing him to nullify Infinite Void after adapting for an accelerated 0.1 seconds. Gojo sees a flaw in Sukuna's counter to Infinite Void, that being that if he opens his domain, Sukuna will now be affected by it since Mahoraga isn't doing the bulk of the tanking for him. However, Sukuna sees through this, noticing the moment that Gojo fucked up. By damaging his brain intentionally and then healing it with RCT, he did accomplish his short-term goal of recovering his burnt out technique, but fucked up by accidentally lobotomy maxing, giving himself brain damage and no longer being able to open his domain as a result. Sukuna proclaims his victory over Gojo and attempts to open his own domain, before realizing that he had also been lobotomy maxing courtesy of tanking a hit from Infinite Void prior to summoning Mahoraga. We are now in round 2 of the fight between the strongest sorcerer of today and the strongest sorcerer in history. The two exchange some more blows before Gojo notes that Mahoraga only needs 3 more spins of its wheel before it can adapt to infinity, which would more or less drastically push the fight into Sukuna's favor. However, my glorious king proclaims that he will kill Sukuna before he can complete those spins. Kashimo watches the fight from the Sneeko chair, waiting to bounce on Sukuna's getting a chance at fighting him. Gojo spams blue and the wheel turns 2 more times. However, Gojo has baited the fuck out of Sukuna, convincing him that he will only use blue, blasting him with the red that Sukuna thinks is trolling, only for the red to loop back around the building and finally explode, which Sukuna had failed to account for. Gojo hits Sukuna with a black flash, which knocks Sukuna out cold. However, the wheel turns once more, and Mahoraga once again grazes the battlefield while Sukuna is taking his power nap. Gojo recalls his close encounter with death courtesy of Toji, and feels a rush of exhilaration from battling an equal. Sukuna wakes up, playing defense for Mahoraga, throwing a fucking fire extinguisher at Gojo and losing 1 billion aura points in the process, before following it up with piercing blood courtesy of the water from Max Elephant. Just as Gojo thinks about how Sukuna's kinda pranking him with a 2-on-1, Sukuna makes it a 3-on-1, summoning merged beast Agito, taking Megami's totality and actually making it useful. Yuta debates intervening to alleviate some of the pressure from Gojo's shoulders, but Kashimo glazes Sukuna some more. Gojo realizes how dire of a situation he is in, vowing to take both Mahoraga and Agito out in 1 hit. Sukuna starts shitting his pants, noting that Gojo could actually still win the fight very easily with purple, begging Mahoraga to be useful. Unfortunately, Mahoraga listens, turning the wheel once more, instantly cutting off Gojo's arm, and showing Sukuna an easier way to get through infinity than the one he had previously used. With both of them realizing that now is the time to strike, Gojo hits Agito with a second black flash before crushing him with a max output blue. His second black flash restores his RCT output, reinvigorating him for the last stretch of the fight. He hits 2 more black flashes on Mahoraga and promptly fires a red towards the blue that had killed Agito. Sukuna cries out for help, knowing that he is on the verge verge of losing. Mahoraga goes to prevent the blue from colliding with red. However, Gojo takes advantage of the fact that Mahoraga had adapted to blue, using blue's energy to propel himself towards Mahoraga, knocking it out of the way. Sukuna fires piercing blood towards red to make it explode prematurely, but Gojo reinforces his blue with incantations to make it swallow it before it makes contact. At last, Gojo unleashes a hollow purple, complete with incantations and no selected target, including himself in the blast radius, instantly disintegrating Mahoraga and mortally wounding the King of Curses with a 200% output hollow purple. Gojo has won.
Yes! 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 No! No! No!
In one beautiful last moment, we get to see Gojo proclaiming his enjoyment of his final battle, his regret that he couldn't get Sukuna to use his ace up his sleeve, and the last time we will see Gojo interact with his closest friends and comrades. Oh, and I guess Toji's bum ass is there too. This beautiful moment is then interrupted by the hard reality that the strongest is dead, having been killed by Sukuna, who had used Mahoraga's second adaptation as a blueprint for his own technique, cutting through Gojo's infinity using a dismantle that targeted not only Gojo, but space and the entire world itself surrounding him. Sukuna, utilizing a binding vow that altered the conditions needed to perform this world bisecting slash, was able to cut Gojo in half in spite of a missing arm. Gojo dies with a slight smirk on his face, and with that, the strongest reaches his end. With no time to waste, Kashimo instantly launches on the battlefield, prepared for the battle he has waited 4 centuries for. Uraume attempts to stall the battlefield once again, to which my goat Hikari promptly tells him to fuck off, before the two begin a battle that will barely be seen by the audience over the next 30 or so chapters. From the iceberg that Uraume had launched onto the battlefield from, comes a curse tool that Sukuna had used back in the Heian era, gifted to him by the late Yorozu, which, as luck would have it, is ineffective against Kashimo. Kashimo finally uses his one-use technique, Mythic Beast Amber, which allows him to use any phenomena that can be created by electricity, so long as he does it before his technique concludes, which would kill him. After landing some good hits on Sukuna, the King of Curses is forced to use the one method of healing that he had been holding off on, fully reincarnating in all of his four-armed glory. Kashimo glazes Sukuna one last time, before being killed so hard that we literally never get to see his body. Meanwhile, Kenjaku is dealing with the remaining Culling Games players, before witnessing the death of Gojo on his phone. Kenjaku tells one of these players how he's shitting his pants hiding from Yuta, before the god of all comedy, Takaba, shows up to do a little bit of trolling with Kenjaku. Kenjaku destroys Takaba's confidence, before Takaba regains it and starts a stand-up routine with Kenjaku, forcing him to play along. The two of them engage in one of the funniest fights in the series, throwing every single ball to the wall in a battle filled with absurdist humor and references that I don't fully understand courtesy of being a straight white man. After the two become a successful stand-up duo, Takaba is able to rest, feeling completely fulfilled by the art form that is comedy. Kenjaku applauds the god of comedy before being struck down by Yuta with the help of Todo's technique. In one last act of trolling, Kenjaku transfers the authority to begin the merger to Sukuna, giving him the absorbed Tengen. Yuta finishes off Kenjaku, destroys the rest of his cursed spirits, has Rika consume him, before heading back to the battle with Sukuna. While Yuta was busy standing on business, Yuji and Higuruma show up in the wake of the lightning god's death, intent on getting Sukuna's curse technique taken away and getting Sukuna a death sentence through a retrial within Higuruma's domain. Sukuna says fuck it we ball, curious about the effects of the executioner's sword, with Sukuna's sentence being confiscation and the death penalty. Except the thing that was confiscated was not Sukuna's technique, but rather the cursed object he obtained at the beginning of the fight. The other sorcerers launch onto the battle, unaware of this fact, and promptly get hit by a flurry of dismantles. Kusakabe protects Higuruma with a simple domain, and Choso stands on business as always, only to promptly get donutted. We learn that Nanami was turned into a marketable plushie upon his death, so we get to see a little bit of his technique being wielded by Ino, his fraudulent ass student. Sukuna glazes Higuruma a little bit, and hits him with a world bisecting slash, which he tanks and heals from, attempting to end Sukuna's life with the executioner's sword, only for it to be revealed that Sukuna had already cut off his own hand in order to avoid the death penalty. Higuruma gets hit by a cleave while buying time for Yuji, and seemingly passes away before the executioner's sword can fulfill its role. We learn here that the groomed one is teleporting onto the battlefield to take the fallen party members to Shoko. Yuji tries to mollywop Sukuna, demonstrating that the body swapping shenanigans were indeed effective in helping him learn RCT. But that doesn't matter right now, as Sukuna spaces out, being bored after Gojo's death. He gets so bored in fact, that he reevaluates his ideals before deciding that he was correct all along, and that now he wants to kill Itadori just for funsies, I guess. Sukuna receives Kenjaku's parting gift of Tengen, declaring that he will kill everybody and then fight the merger. By the way, for those of you who think that the merger was set up and not paid off, no. The merger would have, again, required Sukuna to win against everybody and to kill all of Japan. Chill. The true main character of JJK, Yuta Akatsu, shows up, intent on settling the fight here and now. Sukuna tries to rizz up an actual 11-year-old, and we get to see Yuta's domain in all of its glory. Yuji and Yuta absolutely dog on Sukuna, with Yuta hinting that he consumed the last of Sukuna's fingers in order to gain his technique. Yuji is also able to use blood manipulation now, courtesy of consuming the death wound paintings. Sukuna is hit by Jacob's ladder, and their plan is going perfectly, being nearly foolproof. That is, until Megami's fraudulent bum ass decides, no, which allows Sukuna to hit a world bisecting slash Flash on Yuta. And with that, it seems that Yuta's domain collapses on itself, which was really just a front for Maki to stealth attack Sukuna. Yuta is teleported out of the fight, and we get to witness the peak of heavenly restrictions versus the peak of sorcery. Maki is able to damage Sukuna's soul thanks to her special pair of eyes, forcing Sukuna to manually pump his own blood using curse energy. Yuji is forced to have a bonding moment with Choso, courtesy of the fact that he's dying. Maki and Sukuna proceed to have one of the coolest fights in the series in spite of its brevity, with Maki being able to see Sukuna's technique courtesy of her awakening at the end of the Naoya fight. We get a glimpse at Hikari versus Uraume again, with them weirdly enough having a 2-set this time around, but Uraume just glazes up Sukuna a little more. Sukuna lands a black flash on Maki, knocking her out of the fight for now, leaving the fight up to Kusakabe, who actually does a surprising number on the King of Curses before being off-screen in the funniest way possible. The Groomed One comes to rescue Kusakabe, but nearly gets one-pumped by Sukuna. However, he is saved at the last second by Miguel and his friend Larue, making good on their promise to Yuta earlier. Larue uses his technique to restrain Sukuna, and Miguel breakdances to avoid Sukuna's barrage of dismantles. What? Miguel actually beats the shit out of Sukuna, and Choso, Yuji, and Maki rejoin the fight. Maki cuts Sukuna's left arms off, preventing him from firing off a world bisecting slash thanks to his lack of RCT and the binding vow he made to kill Gojo. Sukuna hits his second black flash, and we get to see the return of Jump Kaisen, before Sukuna lands 2 more black flashes on Maki and Choso respectively. Yuji fires off piercing blood properly for the first time, and promptly hits a black flash himself, starting the process of his own awakening. Yuji is now able to use a more modern version of Sukuna's shrine technique thanks to his heritage and awakening, landing a further 6 black flashes in a row, absolutely destroying Nanami's record. Sukuna starts shitting himself, as his golden opportunity to regenerate his RCT through achieving 4 black flashes was taken away by Itadori's own black flashes. However, despite being hindered by Yuji's awakening, Sukuna was still able to accomplish a monumental feat. Through a combination of the black flashes that he had hit, and the small part of his brain that was unaffected by Infinite Void, as well as stealing Gojo's hand sign, Sukuna was able to unleash an incomplete Malevolent Shrine for 99 more seconds. The group bears it through a mix of RCT and simple domain, and just when everybody thinks they're in the clear, Sukuna unleashes his flames again, the ultimate attack up his sleeve that he was unable to unleash against Satoru Gojo due to all of the domain altering shenanigans. We get another glimpse of Hikari versus Uraume just so that Uraume can glaze Sukuna a little more. Under the conditions of his domain, Furnace would kill everybody, acting essentially as a nuke, which is what he had used to kill Mahoraga in Shibuya. However, Choso, in one final act of brotherly love, creates a blood shield around himself and Yuji, sacrificing himself for the sake of his little brother. When the ashes start to settle, Yuji believes that there is nobody left, only for the man, the myth, the legend, Aoi Todo to return, having saved everybody from the domain with the use of his new technique, Re-Boogie Woogie, which is able to swap people's positions up to 50 times in a second through the use of a Viper Slap, which, by the way, Gege has no clue how a Viper Slap works. Unfortunately though, Choso and Yuji were out of Todo's range. Thus, the best duo in JJK begins dog-walking Sukuna, throwing him on a one-way train straight to getting his ass beat. During the roulette wheel of Boogie Woogies, Sukuna tries to predict a swap, only to get baited by Todo's 530,000 IQ, pump faking the King of Curses 3 times in a row. Yuji lands a black flash, reaching to crush Sukuna's heart, only for Sukuna to attempt to expand his domain once more. However, before casting his domain fully, a pair of unmistakable eyes catches his attention from the smoke surrounding them. The eyes of the strongest, now wielded by Yuta Akatsu. Sukuna becomes absolutely giddy at the sight of his Pookie, tossing Itadori aside, proclaiming his newfound respect for Yuta, before the two of them expand their domains once more. Yuta utilizes a smaller domain in order to withstand Malevolent Shrine, hoping to crush Sukuna within his domain. By the way, Gege got sick in the middle of this fight, presumably from having to draw Gojo for 4 panels, so we got left on a month-long hiatus that would make Hunter x Hunter fans jealous. Anyways, we return a month later with Yuta barely being able to control the Limitless technique even with the 6 eyes. Despite convincing Sukuna that he was losing, Yuta uses a blue to reveal an iPod with Inumaki's curse technique inscribed on it, forcing Sukuna to remain still and eat a hollow purple. The two of their domains collapse, and the trio of Yuji, Todo, and Yuta prepare to jump Sukuna, but Yuta kinda has to take a nap since his copy technique is burnt out. So the remaining two start dogpiling on him once more, with Itadori prying Sukuna off of Megami's body with the use of dismantles targeted precisely at the barrier between their souls. Sukuna vomits some of his fingers up, eating them afterwards like a dog, before it is revealed that Hana and Angel are lingering nearby, firing off one last Jacob's Ladder, attempting to finally put an end to the King of Curses. However, Sukuna acquires the powers of the 4th wall, and reading that the technique has ladder in its name, decides, nah, I'd climb. He ascends to the heavens in an attempt to kill Angel for good, with Todo tanking a second black flash from Sukuna, which decommissions the two of them from the fight. Not realizing that Yuji ascended the Jacob's Ladder with him, he is caught off guard, being thrown for a bit of a loop. Before utilizing that second black flash that he had hit in order to recover his RCT. Sukuna becomes cocky before being absolutely gobsmacked by the sight of Yuji unleashing his domain for the first time. Yuji's domain is an incredibly unconventional one, seeming reminiscent of many of the interactions that Sukuna and Yuji have had during their opponent's last moments. Yuji takes Sukuna on a walk through his domain, showing him his hometown and attempting Sukuna to feel even the slightest bit of sympathy for a person. But once Sukuna realizes that he is being pitied, the fight almost resumes before Megumi interrupts, pleading his case as to why he refused Itadori's help earlier. Itadori sees eye to eye with him, relating Megumi's feelings of helplessness to those of his grandpa's, and with this follows his final clash with the King of Curses. After one last plea for Megumi, he decides to help from inside Sukuna's body, allowing Yuji to get the upper hand. Sukuna steals Gojo's bag one last time and refreshes his technique in order to counter Yuji's domain. Yet, upon destroying Yuji's gauntlets, Sukuna realizes that Yuta had merely been bluffing when he had stated that he had ate the last finger, having instead consumed Yuji's ring finger. Meanwhile, Sukuna's actual last finger sits in an undisclosed location, with none other than a freshly awakened Nobara ready to use resonance on the finger in the nick of time, crushing Sukuna's hopes of a last-ditch domain. How was she alive after having no heartbeat and a hole in her head? I don't know, but honestly, I'm just kind of glad to see her back. Sukuna, now spitting up his fingers, attempts to injure Itadori enough to close his domain, but thanks to a well-timed Divergent Fist and Black Flash, Itadori is able to bring an end to Sukuna's time in Megumi's body. Sukuna attempts to gaslight his way into remaining in control, but Megumi, having been reawakened by Yuji, is able to expel the curse from his body. Sukuna, now a hideous mass, tries desperately to cling onto Megumi for control, but since he is no longer attached to a host, he rapidly loses his size, being confronted by Itadori, who once again gives him one last chance to live. Sukuna, however, being a true hater to the end, rejects Yuji's helping hand, calling him by his name for the first time, before crumbling away, declaring himself a curse in much the same way that Jogo declared himself a human. Meanwhile, we cut back to Hakari and Uraume, who are somehow still fighting. After acknowledging Sukuna's death, Uraume glazes Sukuna one last time before offing themselves, which is kind of toxic when you remember that it is in their body. Sometime later, Megumi wakes up presumably from the effects of being hit by 5 infinite voids and having his body stolen, with some admittedly really cool scars. Yuji and Nobara join him, with Yuji giving the two of them letters from Gojo, containing information regarding their parents, which they reject and laugh at respectively. Yuji gathers Nobara and Megumi before going to see Yuta, who, despite all odds, is back in his original body with 0 consequences. Rika had actually been preparing Yuta's body for his safe return, so I guess all is well in that department. They debate whether or not they could have won with an easier method, which really doesn't matter because Higuruma is fucking alive, courtesy of Sukuna just playing around. They then have a post-game analysis for the sake of people who read JJK exclusively through TikTok, showing how important it was that their plan went the way it unfolded. The Groomed One rightfully glazes himself as the MVP, as let's be honest, everybody would have died without him. And Mei explains how and why she got rid of the Binding Vow to give everybody access to Simple Domain. Spoiler alert, the new Shadow School leader was sapping the life force of the students who were taught Simple Domain, all while holding a monopoly on the Simple Domain, since the only way to learn it was through the Shadow School or through one of the big 3 clans. Why wasn't this discussed like 30 chapters ago when they explained Wiwi's technique? I don't know, but I guess somebody was probably waiting for this. Megumi goes to visit Sumiki's grave with Shoko, who not only stole Teen Getsu's haircut, but also prepared Sumiki's body for an extended stay underground. She also quits smoking here after picking the habit back up in Shibuya. Gakuganji and Urahime discuss how Japan is safe so long as Sukuna's corpse is preserved, which is kind of hilarious. Noritoshi Kamo and his family are safe after previously leaving Japan out of fear of Sukuna, which I may or may not have forgotten to mention earlier. Maki sets Daido and Mio up for a comfortable and long life in Tokyo, so that they'll be safe from the current rounding up and deincarnating of culling game sorcerers courtesy of Hana and her technique. She also just casually throws in a line about the culling games being ended, which, how? I guess probably by taking down the barriers that were set up over the last 1,000 years by Kenjaku. But Gege, please, this is the one time you should explain something. Meanwhile, Charles is still bitching about how hard being a mangaka is, and Takaba is performing stand-up again with a familiar face. Amai attempts to apologize to a girl that he had bullied once, only for her to run away courtesy of his League of Legends aura. Higuruma gets off on all charges and becomes a full-time sorcerer, and Hana assumes that Megumi is flirting with her when he apologizes for, you know, Sukuna tearing her arm off in his body. And at last, we get to watch our trio go on one final mission. This dude, Fukuzawa Sota, has big-ass bug eyes courtesy of someone's curse technique. But he isn't the one being cursed. It's actually his wife, as the main gang see her husband the way he normally looks. They determine that this is the work of a curse user, so they have the couple go in an elevator in order to get out of his range, so they can confirm the curse user's location. As soon as the couple exits his range, our main trio jumps him. The trio makes light work of the dude, who admittedly has a really bad curse technique. After being caught, he proceeds to go on an incel rant about spending money on women. Yuji then thinks back to a conversation he had with Gojo, where Gojo had proclaimed his hopes for Yuji and his peers one day surpassing him in terms of strength, and one day having someone develop said strength through means that are different to his own. Yuji gives the stalker incel a second chance before telling the gang that he had thrown away the last Sukuna finger. Speaking of Sukuna, we get one last glimpse of him interacting with Mahito in some sort of soul limbo. Mahito calls out Sukuna for living out of revenge rather than out of his own accord, and while Sukuna disagrees at first, he acknowledges his own failings in life, even hinting that his selfish ideals may have come from as early as his time in the womb with his brother, and as late as when everybody jumped him in the Heian era, being produced mostly from a place of self-preservation. And in spite of his previous dedication to strength at the cost of everything else, Sukuna tells Mahito that, if given another chance, he would like to try a different path, before walking off, comforting Uraume, revealing an almost father-child dynamic between the two that we hadn't really gotten a glimpse into before. Mahito curses Sukuna for turning away from his hatred, but Sukuna simply replies, "Obviously, I lost after all." And it makes sense. Why would the King of Curses repeat the same path that caused his demise in the first place? Even if he wouldn't admit it to Yuji, self-proclaimed curse may have had more humanity in him than he had let on. We get one last glimpse at our main gang, before panning to the very last page of the manga, with the last Sukuna finger being housed in its original location from the very start of the series. And with that, we have the end of JJK. And while there have been talks of sequels and missed potential and all that sort of shit, JJK is still currently my favorite anime and manga series. Was the ending the absolute best it could have been? No, but it doesn't need to be, as quite frankly, I still think it's very good as a whole. If you find yourself being unsatisfied with JJK's ending, I'd highly encourage you to at least reread from the start of the Sukuna fight, as reading it as a whole rather than on the weekly chapter release basis that we had initially been given allows us to get a more complete picture of the story that Gege was going for, and as such, I think it results in a far more pleasant reading experience. And while I don't think it's wrong to say that the ending does feel a little rushed, especially with it being announced only a month prior to the actual ending releasing, the complete work of JJK has some of my favorite moments, action, and characters that I've had the pleasure of viewing in recent times. So whether you enjoyed it or not is up to you, but personally, I had a lot of fun. Thank you, Gege, for creating peak fiction on occasion, and may everybody who read JJK through TikTok and called it trash, or people who leaked and spoiled it for clout, all of them, I hope they all are forced to consume every drink they'll ever consume through a paper straw. But remember, this truly was our Jujutsu Kaisen, and you are my special.